What's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are answering the question, how can you mix strength and endurance training into your kettlebell workouts? All right, now, here's why we're discussing this, because I recently got an email from a gentleman who goes by the moniker, the forum handle B squared, and he wanted to know the best way to add strength work to his endurance work, which currently is cycling, so he could keep up with the younger guys he rides with. So these are guys that are in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s. And so I told him, B squared, the answer is very simple. However, before we get there, one of the mistakes that people often make, and I actually made this mistake myself as a young trainer back in the mid 90s, is the concept of more of the same. Okay. So there's a school of thought popularized by Tudor Bompa, who is a Romanian exercise and sports physiologist, right? And he wrote a book, all right, some may call it the book on periodization or planning of training, okay? And he states that you need to work on doing super high reps of strength work, which actually becomes endurance work, in order to convert that strength work to endurance, okay? So it's a conversion process. And while that most certainly may well work for young bucks, the teenagers, late teens, early 20 somethings, right? Those types of athletes that Bompa was working with back in the old country, it does not work for guys our age. Now, here's a case in point. As I said, I made this mistake early on in my training career. And so I guess it was almost 30 years ago. I was working with a guy in his mid 40s, and he was training for marathons. His name was Mike Sheridan, and he was a Wall Street trader. So super hardcore guy, right? Imagine that, trading in the pits on Wall Street. So the guy knows how to manage stress and knows what stress feels like, which is one of the reasons he ran marathons, right? For stress relief. Well, what we did is we built up his leg strength, and then we worked to convert, right? That strength into endurance through some higher rep training as specifically prescribed by Tudor Bompa. The results, they were disastrous. I mean, I feel bad laughing about it now, almost 30 years later, but you know what? Mike was sore all the time. His run times dropped. He couldn't recover, and I was perplexed. After all, I was following the expert, right? The guy who wrote the book. So if that doesn't work, what does? Okay, well, here's what I've discovered, and I'm not the only person to have discovered this, I'm sure, right? Probably the simplest way to mix the two, both strength and endurance, is one of two options. Okay, so option one is to work on opposite ends of the spectrum. So you do really low rep work for strength, right? And you do long, slow intensity work for your endurance. So some examples of what I'm talking about. So for strength work, you're going to do 3 to 5 sets of 2 to 3 reps. Okay. And you're going to use really fairly heavy loads, 80%, 85% and greater. Okay. And for endurance work, you're going to do long, slow, below the anaerobic threshold training. And so we're actually talking about running, cycling, rowing here. Okay. And then every once in a while, you're going to go hard on both. And that's probably about 10% of the time. So 90% of the time, your training is going to be on opposite ends of the spectrum. Okay. So in B squared's case, low rep sets of clean and press or front squats 2 to 3 times per week in addition to his current cycling schedule will suffice. Okay. Now, however, for many folks, right, who can't afford the time to go out on long rides or long runs, right, this option or this approach, option one, is not only time but energy prohibitive, which opens the door for option two. And that's what we call, or I call, power endurance training using our kettlebells. Okay. Now, this is actually pretty simple to do. It involves your explosive kettlebell ballistics. Okay. So think swings, one hand swings, all kinds of swings, right? Snatches, clean and jerks, clean and push presses. Okay. And you're going to do repeated bouts of those ballistics, 20 to 30 minutes and sometimes longer. Now, here's why. Okay. So number one, power is trained by your ballistics. Okay. So virtual force, okay, is created on the backswing of the ballistics. And that's the increased acceleration that changes your force output. So you're literally producing more force on each and every rep. Okay, so that's number one. And number two, cardiovascular endurance, okay, is actually trained between your sets. Now, how do you do this? Well, this actually results from your heart rate increasing as a result of the power training, okay, and then decreasing and recovering between the ballistic repeats. Okay, so here's what I mean. You do a set of swings. I'm sure you've experienced this before, and they're short and they're hard and they're powerful, and you're not really out of breath. You put it down, and then the out of breath feeling hits you. Okay, and it's that gap, that period of time between that set and the second set that we're training your cardiovascular endurance. Okay, so what is an actual example of this? Well, an example would be one set sets of 1 clean and 1 jerk with your 5 rep max of the clean and jerk on the minute for 30 minutes or so. Okay, another example, 5 swings on the minute for 30 minutes. Now, you get the picture, right? Now, some people swear by option 1. I personally swear at it. Okay, just kidding. I personally don't like long, slow distance, right? And others swear by option 2. So how do you know which one of these 2 options will work for you? Well, you test it out for yourself and you see. Can it really just be this simple? Yes. Is it more complicated than this? Yeah, it can be. But for the average Joe or Jane who no longer wants to be average, well, power endurance training has the possibility, potential, the ability, however you want to say it, to turn your world right side up. Okay, if you need some programs, I'll leave 3 of my favorite ballistics-based power endurance training programs in the video description below. All right, one last thing. What's interesting to note here is that many people who embrace power endurance training using the kettlebell ballistics also report simultaneously losing body fat and even putting on some muscle, even though that's not their main goal. So for many people, maybe even you, power endurance training using kettlebell ballistics appears to be the best of all worlds. Okay, hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, click the like button, smash the subscribe button, share it with a friend, leave a comment in the description below. Until next time, stay strong.